Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. So this is my medical school interview preparation series and calling it a series, is that a bit pretentious? I'm going to be doing a lot of videos on preparing for your medical school interviews. Why? Because it's really difficult to get into medical school, and if I can help anyone else get in and minimise the kind of emotional turbulence, then I'm gonna do that. So upcoming videos will be things like time management in an interview, staying calm during your interviews, how to manage kind of different role play scenarios, like ethical dilemmas that you might be asked, some of the trickier questions like why medicine, or why this uni, or what difficulties do doctors face, and kind of the different things that you should maybe do to prepare for those interviews. But today is going to be quite a general video on a mixture of how I prepared for my medical school interviews and what I would recommend you doing. Some of it I didn't do myself, but if I were doing the interviews this year, I would definitely be doing them. But you know, hindsight is a bitch. Let's just get into it. Today, I want to talk about preparing for medical school interviews in kind of like topics that you should be thinking about beforehand. It's kind of going to be a bit of a high level overview of the kind of things that you need to be thinking about before you go into your interviews, and you know, tips. So the first one is very general. I would say you need to reflect on everything. Yes, that is a lot, but you know, from what I understand, medical school, in terms of the kind of assignments and stuff like that, there is a lot of reflective work. So it's a good idea to just start now, like why not? So when I say reflect on everything, I'm talking like, why do you want to do medicine? I know that seems like very obvious, but I think the first round of applications that I did 2 years ago, I hadn't really thought of it. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't like pinpoint why. There was no defining moment in mind that I stuck at the top of my personal statement. Yeah, you need to know exactly why you want to do medicine. Think about kind of like what you've learned during your work experience. I'm a firm believer that no work experience is irrelevant. I think there's transferable skills that you gain from literally everything you do. And you know, like even talking about a retail job or like your hobbies and stuff like that, while it's not related to medicine, you can still take things from it that can be valuable. So reflect on the experiences that you've had in literally everything you've done that's made you notable. You need to reflect on everything. Okay, second thing, I would say you definitely need to know what you're getting yourself into. The questions that I've flailed at in interviews the most have been things like, what do you think makes being a doctor so difficult? Or what do you think is the hardest thing that doctors have to overcome? Or, you know, words to that effect. So you need to think about like all the hardships. Why is it that medicine's so hard to get into? Why do people want to do it? Especially in the UK where, you know, like if you're in it for the money, you could go into financial things, banking, accountancy, so many things now that pay so much better. You know, a lot of people have this perception that doctors are all making like mega bank, but the reality of it is that doesn't really happen until you're a consultant, and even then it's not like crazy. So yeah, in the UK, why is it you want to do medicine? What are you willing to put in for the output? You know, what are you willing to put up with, the kind of working hours and the constant learning for the rest of your life? Like, you've never reached the top. There's always going to be someone more experienced than you. I know that's true for most things, but in medicine you're always learning because science is moving at warp speed at all times, and so what is taken as a given knowledge now is not going to be true in 5 years, and you have to be ready to kind of like roll the punches. I'd say the second thing being, know what you're getting yourself into. It is a lifetime vocation. It's not something that you can just do medical school, get a job and that's it. Like, you're going to be learning, training and like improving forever. The third thing you need to do is practice speaking in front of a mirror or to people, or both ideally. You need to get comfortable speaking in a kind of more professional, formal way. Like, even if it means kind of setting up your phone on a shelf somewhere and recording yourself speak to it like you're talking to someone in an interview. It sounds crazy and it sounds really uncomfortable and awkward, and I probably would have thought it was unnecessary a couple years ago, but again, hindsight. You need to just get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah, cringe, but necessary. And the fourth thing that I would say that you really need to focus on, the fourth thing would be brainstorm everything you've done. So this is kind of a bit like number one, where I was talking about reflecting on things, but I'm going to show you what I mean, so bear with. So I'm going to show you exactly what I do when I'm preparing for any interview, but I think it's especially useful for medicine, particularly because you'll be talking about kind of everything that makes up you and your journey thus far, and why you think you're ready for the journey in full. And so yeah, so it starts with a very high level breakdown. I would say if you know that your interview is going to be assessing certain kind of criteria, so for example like insight into medicine, work experience, like commitment, and you can go off their website or the email that they've sent you prior to your interview, then use that and start there. And so I would start off by brainstorming insight to medicine. So I'm just gonna jump to my trusty whiteboard and show you what I mean. Okay, I'm just going to talk you through what I normally do. So this is just going to be a very basic mind map. Ignore my dodgy handwriting and the awful camera work. So basically, I would look at insight into medicine and think, okay, what could I think about when I'm talking about that? And so that's why I've written down work experience. And then off of that, I'm going with any relevant work experience that I think I could talk about in an interview. So shadowing, so I worked as a support worker for a year, and that would have been something that I would have. Also volunteering, so I volunteered at my local hospital for a year, just visiting weekly and literally just talking to patients in the acute stroke ward. And so next, I've gone with discussions. So discussions I've had with, for example, a GP. So any questions that you can ask doctors and things like that at the time that you're shadowing is like a great idea to do, so take advantage of the time that you've got. I had a lot of lecturers who were specialists in certain areas of medicine because I was doing a medical science degree. And then I've written my auntie because she's a surgeon, so I've had many a conversation with her about medicine. So I did a lot of reading before interviews, and I couldn't recommend the British Medical Journal enough. Blogs I love because you get real insight into the life of doctors and things. And then self-education, so I wouldn't recommend that you talk about YouTube videos or YouTubers that you watch, but insights that you can get from YouTube can be valuable in what you talk about in interviews. So I'd say like definitely take note of the things that you hear and read that you think would resonate in an interview and apply that to your own experience. But you could also go by kind of skills that and attributes that they're going to be assessing. Time management, good under pressure, that kind of thing. And you could mind map kind of different scenarios, because eventually you should be mind mapping scenarios anyway, and I'll show you what I mean now. So this is kind of where you deep dive into the individual experiences that you've had that have kind of made up your understanding of what doctors do. And so I would go into kind of more detail about like work experience. I've written down support work. Off of support work, I'd want to be noting down any skills that I think that are of value to doctors or that would be looked for in interviews or could be considered like amongst the criteria. For example, time management and handling high pressure environments or situations. So I've written down handling pressure. But what I meant by brainstorming scenarios or mind mapping scenarios is that when I'm thinking of time management and handling pressure, I'd want to be thinking of specific circumstances, occasions in which I've done that. I'll be talking more about how you can talk about those how you can talk about those situations in your interview in the next video.
And I would just keep going with this and branching off more, and then do this for all of the things that I think relate to that criteria, and then that's kind of a really good framework to kind of work out what situations you think are going to be notable and ideally tick off more than one of the criteria and skills and qualities of a doctor. So yeah.
So once you've done that for all of the kind of criteria that you found on the website of the uni that you're interviewing at, or on forums like the student room, you should definitely jump on the student room and look at the forums. Then you should go and make some sort of document. Could be a mind map as well, but if you're getting sick of mind maps, you could always take each one of those and kind of put it on maybe a cue card, for example, or just write it down on a bit of paper if you're not feeling bougie, and and think of an example, like a really specific example for each one. So for example, if you're talking about in the work experience you've done in shadowing, and you want to be able to say that you noticed how well a multidisciplinary team came together, then think of a specific example of a time where that happened. You can't just say, oh yeah, I shadowed a doctor and I saw how well he worked with the nurses and the blah blah blah. Like, you want to have something very specific to be able to talk about. Why? Because I have, over the last 3 years, done a lot of interviews myself, like been interviewed. I've also been the interviewer in a few situations. I interviewed people last year for summer camp, and I interviewed people for an internship program I did while I was at university, and I continue to do that every year now since I'm an alumnus. And so kind of in every situation I've seen exactly what it is they're looking for from your answers. And watch the next video for inside deets on how to answer questions in interviews concisely, eloquently, without rambling. Rambling is one thing that I'm sure you've noticed I do lots of, and that's because I'm not following my own advice. Yeah, upcoming video is going to be on the STAR method and how to perfect it and what you need to do to use it to prepare for your medical school interviews. So if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Sorry to have to say it, I know. And see you in the next one.